To the traditional gender model would be a model that I would call the authentic gender model, one that actually represents everybody, all 6 billion people on our planet, using the same 4 components: sex, gender role, gender identity, and sexual orientation, but looking at each of those as being more complex than just one or the other, looking at them as a scale or a spectrum. We know that there are men that have breasts and there are women that have very small breasts or no breasts. We know that people's body hair differs, that people's chromosome structures differ, hormone levels differ, and we know that their genitalia differs. Our bodies are born differently, they also change over time. Some may choose to change their bodies, so that sex would have to be plotted differently for each individual.
Part of my own history as far as being a trans person is really understanding and really remembering every part of my transition and remembering what the struggle was that I went through in order to get to where I am today. I've had 2 surgeries and been on hormones for 5.5 years and have paid a lot of money and have had to work really hard, and I'm really broke.
Gender roles do change over time, and they change within cultures. In sort of Western American culture, the only emotion that we really give and allow men to have is either anger or sort of stoic pride. If men cry, we consider that feminine. But that's not the way in all cultures. In some cultures, men cry very openly and are expected to, and it's considered masculine behavior. So it's clear that it's not a genetic component of who a man is, and it's not a biological component, but crying or anger can be seen as social aspects of who we are.
Expressing my feminine spirit outwardly is crucial for me to be true to myself and for me to be happy.
The third component will be gender identity, something that's unique for each individual. So 6 billion people, 6 billion gender identities. Not even a spectrum or a scale, just individual points.
I never really felt like a lot of other people that I know in terms of being born in the wrong body. I feel pretty comfortable enough that I don't think that I'm going to physically transition. I don't know, things could change.
The final piece would be sexual orientation. Our traditional model likes to say that men date women and women date men. We know it's much more complex than that. We know that there are people that there are women that date women, there are men that date men, there are people that date both sexes or genders. Some people are attracted to transgender people, some people are celibate.
Because I date other masculine or people or men, I identify more with a gay male community or as a gay man than anything. I don't know. But I don't identify as a gay man.
So each of these aspects, where we're talking about sex, gender role, gender identity, or sexual orientation, is some sort of spectrum or scale, something vast and explosive as opposed to narrow and contracted.
One way to define transgender people is people who don't conform or identify with the expectations associated with the gender or sex they were assigned at birth.
You're constantly overly concerned about the rest of the world, because what does that mean? If I start to transition now, then I have to interact with the rest of the world. If I had just been dealing with myself, I think I would have come to terms with it sooner than I actually did. Now I'm very attached to my own identity being as a trans man.
People come from different places and different cultures and races and classes. So the terms that people use for themselves may really vary. People have really different terms and words that are used to identify themselves. Drag king, drag queen, bigendered, omnigendered, female to male, male to female, trans woman, transgender man, transsexual woman, femme queen, tranny, transgenderist. Another definition of transgender would be people who feel that the binary gender system of male and female doesn't leave enough room for their identities.
I don't identify as a man or a woman, and there have been times in my life when I have really conformed more to more traditional, like, femininity, but it never really felt that right for me.
a definition of genderqueer for a person might be someone who doesn't identify with the dichotomy of the norms of a man or a woman, who might feel somewhere in between. They might feel like somebody who identifies as a man and a woman, or neither a man or a woman, or something right in the middle. People assume that all of the transgender people out there are going through a medical gender transition. And we know that in the relative population of people out there who might be gender nonconforming, a relatively small number of people actually go through what would be considered a full medical transition.
They don't always understand that if I don't feel like a woman as I was supposed to because I was born a female and socialized as female, then that must mean that I'm transitioning to be a man. And that doesn't really fit for me.
If you are in a situation where you work in an agency or someplace where you have a lot of contact with individuals coming in and in numbers, you've got to have some way to be able to equalize it so that transgender people will have the ability to identify themselves and have the space to do that and have you interact with them in an appropriate way.
People are looking at me and they have to give me an ultrasound on my lower abdomen, and they're looking at my paperwork, and it's just, of course, it says something about checking for things like cysts, ovarian cysts, and all of this other business. I mean, the technicians are just like dumbfounded. Like, they really didn't know what to do. They really didn't understand what it was that they were looking at.
It's not always easy to know how people refer to themselves.
For me, I think it's really important that just on a gender level that she is used, her.
We can take a look at someone and see based on the way they're dressed or how they look. That might be an incorrect guess. The other way to find out would be something that sounds simple, which is to ask. To ask someone, how do you identify yourself? How do you identify your gender? What pronoun do you like to use?
I always really appreciate it when people ask me what my gender identity or my pronoun preference is.
The problem with asking is that sometimes people feel like it should be obvious based on how they look.
I think my presentation is fairly clear. I think, even if it might not be fully successful, what I'm going for, I think, is clear.
So asking might offend somebody, but one of the ways around that is to actually ask everybody their gender. At the center, we have intake forms and screening forms, so that everybody who walks through the door, we ask them their sexual orientation, we ask them their age, we ask them their race or ethnicity, and we also ask them their gender identity. So that allows us to actually have people self-identify, so we don't have to guess by looking at somebody what their gender is.
Sometimes it does feel like I'm putting myself on the chopping block, for sure. But I'd rather people ask questions, even if they're not nice questions, than not try to understand.
For me, there's so many other aspects of who I am beyond me being transgendered, and I think part of what upsets me is when people can't get past that.
One of the important things is to not just reduce a transgender person to only having this identity.
I work at bars, I go promote for events and benefits, and I'm not a morning person.
I'm an artist. More than anything, I think I'm an artist.
I'm Chinese American, I'm a performance artist, I am a therapist, I'm a dog owner, like all these different things.
It is so painful to live a lie. It really is. And it's so freeing to be true to yourself. And we should be applauded for that. We should not be persecuted for that. We should not be discriminated against and denied services, housing, jobs for that. We should be celebrated and we should be valorized. And I think that's what I want to say to people.